Hello everybody. Today we're going to discuss how to design a notification system. So a notification system is usually very important for any uh, large or any user-centric system. Whether you are building a social media or you are building a mortgage management system or whatever you are building, designing a robust notification system is one of the key component. It's a very common system design interview question as well. So before we start, as I'm going to talk from a system design interview standpoint, the first thing to do is defining the requirements. Just design a notification system is a very vague uh, requirement. We need to find out exactly what we're looking for. For example, which platform are we targeting? Is it only web, or is it mobile, or is it something else? Maybe email, right? Something like that. What kind of notification you can have? Let's see, email, push notification, SMS, things like that. Another requirement is, do we need it to be real time or not? So one key distinction for now, we'll assume that we need real time notifications, but one important thing to keep in mind is if a notification system doesn't need to be real time, the design is a bit different. Different in a way we can kind of batch the notifications or things like that. For example, you get your monthly balances at the end of the month from the bank. Those are not real-time notifications, and the design for those notifications are a bit different than when you are getting a notification for a Facebook comment or a Twitter DM or something like that. So that is another requirement we need to clarify before we start. Uh, we need to know how the notifications will get triggered. So if it's a social media, then based on certain interactions. If it's a backend notification system, maybe from a bad job or something like that, or whatever it is, we need to know what kind of notification we are talking about, what kind of trigger we are talking about. We also need to know how many users will be using the system so that we do not create any bottleneck or do not create any inefficient solution that will not scale. So these are some of the questions we may ask to our interviewer to get a sense of exactly what kind of system we are looking for. Uh, Based on that, the next part is dividing the problems. Usually, what I like to do is I divide the problem into whatever parts necessary. In this case, I think there are two parts of the problem. The first step is to collect the data. What kind of data are we talking about? We'll talk in bit more details, but let's say if we want to send an email to a certain user, we need to know their email address. If we want to send a push notification, we need to know their device token, things like that. So that is our first step. So before you start sending notifications, you first need to know whom you are sending the notifications to. So that will be the step one. Step two is delivering the notifications. That it will be our main focus actually, and we need to go deeper into this step two rather than step one. But step one is necessary. So it's a good idea to mention this step one. And if you see that the interviewer is not that interested in discussing the data collection part, you can move on to step two. Now, let's talk about the data collection part. On a high level, it is very simple. Whenever users sign up, if we have an authentication system or not, so it can be a clarification point. So when you are gathering the requirements, you can ask that to um, only users get the right. That could be another question. The reason is if a user has a sign in or sign up process, we can streamline the data collection process. We do not need to prompt them for additional details. But if we do not have any kind of authentication system, then we need to design that part as well. Maybe after they start using the system, we need to prompt them with a custom model or something like that and ask them for their email address or something like that. So it's an important thing to clarify before we start. For now, let's assume that we have a sign in or sign up process. Then whenever the users are signing up, or whenever have a new sign in, we need to make a call to the server, right? So with the user data can be email, phone or device token or whatever it is, maybe phone number, things like that. And the server will save the user data into our database. In this case, it's always a good idea to start with a high level design and then go deep into each process. For example, uh, let's talk about the user sign up process or collecting this email, phone, or device token things. So let's say we only have email sign in or sign up, but we want to send push notifications. How do we do that? For push notifications, we need device token. So it's not actually mandatory to gather the data during sign up, because after the sign up, on any new sign in, we need to create or need to store that particular token for that particular device. What it means, so let's see if we have a user here. A user may have two devices, device 1 and device 2. They only sign up in one device. So let's say they sign up in device 1, but they use that credential to sign in to device 2 as well. So we need to store both. So it's an important thing to clarify. The second thing is, uh, if we have email authentication, but if we want to send them text SMS, right? Text notification, SMS notification. How do we do that? Same thing, we need to think of something there. Again, a good idea to ask the interviewer if they're interested to discuss about that. Maybe the people will have a profile section where they will fill up the phone number, or they will have a profile completion flow after they sign up, something similar. Then comes the server. It can be a very simple server. No complex thing is going on here. It's a simple API to start with. Uh, if we have a huge number of users, maybe we can add a couple of servers with a load balancer in front of it. So in that case, so at every level, we can add more complexity, right? So let's we add a load balancer at this step. So it's another possibility, or it can be another discussion point. Now, storing the database, let's talk about how do we store the data. A very important part of any system design question or discussion is, are you able to identify the data models and design the relationships, decide on what kind of data storage you are using. So let me write these points up. What kind of database, what kind of models, what relations do we need, right? So these are the questions you need to think about. Let's talk about them one by one. I think in this case, a relational database should be fine, although a non-relational database doesn't do any harm. But I think we need kind of a relation here. What kind of relation? Let's talk about that. So let's say we have a user collection and we need a user um, device collection, right? A user may have multiple user devices, something like that. So let's say one user device can be, let's say, a phone, another user device can be web, another can be phone, right? Something like that. It can be email as well. So we can maybe keep a type here as well. So what kind of device are we talking about? Maybe we can name this in a better way. Instead of telling them device, we can say something like user communication method or something like that, right? So a particular user may have multiple channels, and we have to constantly think about how do we store the data, how do we retrieve the data, how do we update the data, and how do we delete the data. So just touch a little bit on that part. Um, we have discussed how we can store the data, right, during the sign up process or the profile completion flow. If we give the users a deletion option, see if they can delete their profile, we can remove this relations. We can maybe remove the user and have a cascading relation. So all of these user device entries will be deleted automatically. Updating, so we have to think about when they are signing out. What's happening when they're signing out? So let me in fact write down these scenarios. I think that would be more easy. So sign up or sign in. We need to store the data. When they sign out, remove the data, because we need to remove the device token from the database when they're signing out. It's very important, because otherwise, let's say I sign out from a particular app and someone else sign in with their credential, but they can continue getting my notifications because I didn't remove my device token. And delete profile or update settings, delete the token. Right, so these are the scenarios that can happen when we are talking about storing the user relation data. So I think that's about it on a high level of the data collection process. Obviously, we can go deeper into each of these steps. For example, do we need a load balancer? What kind of algorithm we are using for load balancing? How many servers do we need? Do we need to scale the database? Do you want to scale the database vertically or horizontally? Do you need any kind of sharding or not? Again, those discussions depend on the situation or the requirements. If you think that the interviewer is interested to talk about any particular subject more, you should go deeper into that topic. So here is our data collection process. Now let's move on to the step two, which is our notification delivery process. How do we actually deliver the notification? So up to this point, you understand that you already have a database. You know certain information about the user. So you know their device token, is it Apple or Android, right? You know the email, you know their phone number. Usually these are the things you need to send a notification. So at the core of our solution, there is a notification system or notification server, something like that, right? So on a high level, there can be different services. So not only clients, but also different servers can. For example, service one can be auth server. Service two can be order management. Another one can be inventory management, things like that. So we need to have the logic for notification centralized in a particular place, and this is that particular place. That is notification system. On a high level, different services requests the notification system to send a particular notification to a certain receiver. So let's talk about the API here. So let's say we need to have an API called send notification. Very straightforward. And the payload for this send notification, we can talk about that here as well. So in the payload, we need to know the content, we need to know the recipient, we need the type. So type means do we need push or email or SMS? What kind of notification are we talking about? Um, on a high level, these are the major things we need to include in the send notification request. Now, coming to the notification system itself, how it works. So the notification system will first check for the recipient. It will check the type. If it's a push notification, it will check for the device tokens. If it's an email notification, it will check for the email address. If it's an SMS, it will look for the phone number. And the notification system will then deliver the notification to the appropriate receiver. Now let's talk about this delivering part, right? So here we actually deliver the notification. Now we need some domain specific knowledge here. This is very particular to this particular system. Now different notifications work in different ways. For example, for push notification, we have two kind of devices, right? For push notification, we have Apple and we have Android. For Apple, we actually have something called APN, right? And for Android, we have FCM. So Firebase Cloud Messaging and Apple Notification Delivery System or something like that. I forgot the abbreviation, but basically for push notification, for sending both of these, what you need is actually a device token and obviously the payload, right? So for sending push notification, you need to pass the device token and the payload. These two things you deliver to either Apple or Android, which means when you are actually storing the data for here user, we need to store what kind of phone are we talking about, what type of device, is it Android or iOS or what, something like that. Okay, let's talk about email notification. How does email notification works? So for email notification, we actually can use some SMTP server. There are many good services. We don't need to create anything from scratch. There is a good service called Recent that I use. There is Mailchimp. Uh, there are some other services as well. Right? Mailgun. You need to sign up there. You need to get the credentials, and you can send the email notifications in that way. So the last thing that we have is SMS notification. For SMS notification, one good option is to Twilio. Again, these are automated, these are already established services, so you don't need to create anything from scratch. We are already using the existing services, which are very popular. And if the interviewer asks you how would a particular notification system work, then you will go deep into that. So but unless you are explicitly asked, I think it's better to use, or maybe you can ask the interviewer for clarification here that do we need to create anything from scratch here? I think in most cases that will not be the case. So let me connect these dots for better understanding. Okay. So as you can see, we need the appropriate uh, information before we are requesting to send a particular notification to a particular user or device. Different services will be contacting our notification server. The notification server will look into the DB to get the appropriate info and then decide what kind of services to use to actually deliver the notification. So that's on a high level. Again, all of these things can be discussed more in depth. Usually, what I like to do as in a real life interview situation, what you need to do is you can talk about each of these boxes and you can talk about each of these connections. That's a good way to go deeper into particular topics. For example, what happens as we have a lot of users, right? So how do we scale our notification system? That can be a good discussion point, right? What if there are so many users that our one server is not able to take the load? So in those scenarios, again, there can be several solutions. I'm just touching briefly, but again, and it depends on the situation. We can have a message queue, right? If you think that okay, we need to uh, process the notifications sequentially and we may have a lot of notifications to process, you can use a message queue. You can add a load balancer here and use multiple servers. For the database part, you can use sharding. Also, all of these services have their own limitations and limits. So service limits, for example, let's say 3,000 emails per day, 5,000 emails per day. How do you handle those situations? You can talk about that. Also, these notifications might have some delays. So, is that acceptable or not? For example, push notifications are usually very instantaneous, but if you try to send a lot of SMSs at the same time, some might get delivered later than others. So these are the things that you can talk about depending on the situation and the questions or the discussions with your interviewer. So in this brief video, I tried to discuss how to design a notification system and how to approach a problem like this. Again, on a high level, just to recap, we first need to clear out the requirements. We need to divide the problem into multiple steps. We need to talk about each of these steps first, starting from the very basic, and then going deeper into each box and each uh, connections, and knowing what to talk about and what not to talk about. So these are the most important things when you're doing a system design interview. Thank you so much if you have seen this far. I hope it was helpful for you, and see you next time. Have a nice day. Bye.